An Azure Virtual Network is your private network in the cloud, which is a fundamental building block for securely hosting your applications and resources within Azure. Each virtual network is isolated from other virtual networks to ensure the security and privacy of your resources. Resources within a virtual network can communicate with each other without needing the public IP addresses. You can connect your on-premises network to an Azure virtual network using VPN or express route. Virtual networks can be easily scaled to accommodate growing workloads. Network security groups and the Azure firewall provide the robust security for your virtual networks. Additionally, you can use third party network virtual appliances as well to secure these virtual networks. You can create subnets within a virtual network to do the microsegmentation of your network based on application or the security requirements so that you can apply different security policies and the routing policies on a particular subnet. Let's jump into the implementation of Azure Virtual Networks. To create a virtual network in Azure, you need to click on this hamburger icon on the left in Azure portal. Click Create Resource. You can search for the virtual network in this free search button, or you can go to the networking blade on the left and choose the network service, which is virtual network. Click Create button. Select your subscription. If you don't have a subscription, you can sign up for the Azure free trial. Create a resource group or use existing resource group. This is for testing purpose. I named it as test RG. The name for the virtual network, test virtual network. Select the region where you want to deploy this virtual network. Next, you can select virtual network encryption so that the communication between two virtual machines within a VNet is end-to-end encrypted. For this, there is also a requirement that your virtual machine LAN card must have the accelerated networking enabled on it, which leverages the single root IO virtualization SRIOV, through which it bypasses the host or the virtualization network stack and sends the traffic directly to the physical NIC. You also can use a management service for managing your servers effectively using Azure Bastion. I have done a separate video on Azure Bastion. If you have not watched that video, you can go and visit that Azure Bastion video. You can use Azure Firewall to secure this network, to have the inbound and outbound traffic inspection. This firewall can do the netting also, the source netting or destination netting. You can secure this perimeter network from DDoS attack also. So you can implement the distributed denial of service attack protection on your virtual network, which is a paid service like the other services. Select next. Here comes the address space. You can use IP version 4 or IP version 6. You will choose the RFC 1918 standard IP addresses, the private IP address spaces. For an instance, in the range of 10 for class A, it will be 10.0.0.0/8, whereas for class B, it is 172.16.0.0/12, and in that 12 means that we can use 4 bits to make the changes here. We can have 16 networks in this class B. We can use from 16 to 31 anything. Like in this slide deck, in the previous slide deck, it was the network with 30. So I created with 172.30.0.0/16, which will provide me 65,536 addresses, total addresses. Now you will divide this one big network into multiple small subnetworks. So you will provide your subnets here. Either you can go with this as default or you can edit this subnet with some attributes. For an instance, this will be for my app servers. So based on the application tiers, you can define your subnet names. And this subnet will be 172.30.0.0 and it is 24-bit as the slash notation. That means 8 bits subnetting has been done because address space is 16 and now it is 24. So with 24 you will get total 256 addresses where 251 addresses will be usable. If you want, you can enable the NAT gateway. Microsoft provides a NAT gateway to your network by default, but if you want to use your NAT gateway, you can provision and put it. You can enable service endpoints like I discussed that you can connect to the Azure services like Azure Storage or the um, Azure SQL or Entra ID. Such cloud services can be connected using Microsoft's backbone network privately rather than connecting through the public endpoints or public connections. So you can privately connect to them by enabling the service endpoints. These settings are configurable after the deployment of the virtual network as well. You can do subnet delegation also, so delegate subnet to a service or network policy for the private endpoint. So if you want to define some policies for the private endpoints that you will create to connect to the services privately using Microsoft's backbone network, so you can define those policies. Finally, you will click save and then next. If you want to add more subnets, you have the button over here to add the subnet. You can choose the purpose of the subnet. So this purpose of the subnet can be default, then you can name it anything. So for an instance, you want to provide it for databases. So you can create a subnet for a database server. So this is your database subnet for database servers to have different policies. It will intelligently calculate the next CIDR block. So this is 172.30.1.0 and then you will add this. In this way, you can add multiple subnets. In fact, you can add more than one address space as well. Subnet purposes, for an instance, I will use Azure Bastion in this network. So I could have selected it over here within the security initially, but I can add this now as well. If I want to add another subnet, let's say I will be using the virtual network gateway for hybrid connectivity. So I can create this special subnet called virtual network gateway in this virtual network. You need to plan and design your virtual network with all the required subnets well in advance. Also, the address space must not be overlapping with any network that you have in on-premises or in any other cloud for connectivity purpose in future. The purpose of this, let's say, is for firewall. So I want to use this for firewall. So Azure firewall subnet will be deployed. CIDR blocks have been calculated automatically. When you are done by creating the required subnets, then you can click next and create this virtual network. Like I mentioned, if you want to add another address space also in it, then you can add more than one address spaces to a virtual network. So this is my one of the network, and the other one that has come over here is 10.0.0/16. Or if I want to use another network over here, so for an instance it is going to be 172.20.0.0/16. So I can add that address space and then I can add the subnets to that address space as well. For an instance, I will be using for my web servers. So this is for my web servers, and this is the address space for the subnet, and I will click add. And instead of this calling it web server, I must say web subnet. I can ignore the tag or I can provide them just for identification of these resources that I'm deploying. So it's a key value pair. Add the tag for testing. Next. It's running the final validation to deploy this virtual network. I will click on create button to create this virtual network. Once this virtual network is deployed, I can start deploying my workloads into Azure. I will go to this virtual network where I can show you the address spaces that I added on this virtual network. Under the settings blade, you will see two address spaces. You can add more address spaces now as well. So you have the option to add additional address space. For an instance, 192.168.0.0 slash 24. So I have defined this small network address space in this, or if I want to have more addresses, I want to do the subnetting within that, so I can define a different slash notation. So it can be anything from 16 to uh, you know 31. I can create it with required address space, and then I can create the subnets inside this network like 192.168.0, then 192.168.1 with slash notation, maybe 24 8-bit subnetting. Then I can add the subnets to this address space. Here we have the option to add the subnets. So this is the add subnet button. Gateway subnet is grayed out because I already have deployed the gateway subnet in this virtual network. We can have one gateway subnet in one virtual network. This is how we can deploy a virtual network in Azure. There are other settings like setting up the bastion or the DNS settings, Azure provided DNS or custom DNS, that have been discussed in other tutorials. So you can visit a tutorial on a particular topic, be it DDoS protection, firewall, or the bastion that you want to learn more, or the DNS, or the peering of these networks and the service endpoints. I hope this tutorial was informative. Thanks for watching.